Hi, I'm Aaron Nichols, and this is my EdTech portfolio reflection video. In this reflection video, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my work as an academic librarian and why I decided to take on the Master of Educational Technology program through Boise State University. For the middle portion of this video, I'm going to reflect on my time in the EdTech program and also describe some of the projects that I created that have had an impact on my career as an academic librarian. While I won't be able to go over all of the projects in my portfolio or even all the projects that really impacted my career in academic libraries, I have selected some to highlight in this video that really did have a positive impact on my career. And to wrap this video up, I'm going to add a final reflection on my personal growth and development and discuss in more general terms how thinking like an educational technologist has improved my career as an academic librarian. So I'm a native New Englander. I grew up in Braintree, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston. It's located about 12 miles from downtown Boston. I graduated from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1997 with a bachelor's in history. And after I graduated from college, I worked in publishing for about 5 years. And one of my jobs was with academic publishing. At Wolters Kluwer, I worked as a production editor where I assembled and designed book covers, and I was in charge of the editorial process for academic journals. I knew that while I was in publishing that there was something missing, though. I really missed the intellectual challenges I had in college. I missed the level of research that I did in college. And while I was in publishing, I had the opportunity to go to many conferences, and some of them were library conferences. This is where I sort of got hooked into the idea of becoming an academic librarian. I would talk to folks who were working in academic libraries, and it sounded like a great job. And fortunately for me at the time, University of Rhode Island had a satellite program in Boston where I was able to take a couple of classes at night. After taking 2 courses, I decided to take the plunge and go to graduate school full-time, and that was in 2002. In 2004, I graduated from library school, and I quickly found a job out in Wisconsin. There I worked at the University of Wisconsin-Marinette, and then back at UMass Amherst for about a year. And in 2008, I took a job at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point as the Access Services Librarian. It was at UW-Stevens Point where I decided to take on the Master of EdTech program here at Boise. As a faculty librarian, part of what I needed to accomplish was a second master's degree in order to attain tenure. The reason I chose the EdTech program was because I felt like what I would learn in EdTech would really enhance my work as an academic librarian, and that proved very much to be true. The focus of my work at UW-Stevens Point was on teaching. I did a little bit of management. I managed the interlibrary loan departments and the circulation department at UW-Stevens Point, but most of my work was in teaching, and most of the work I did on my EdTech projects while I was at UW-Stevens Point were teaching-related projects. In 2011, I took a job with University of Vermont, where I currently work as the Access and Media Services Librarian. And this job takes a completely different track. Instead of my focus being on teaching, my focus is completely on administrative tasks. I manage a lot of people, and I have to make a lot of things happen and utilize my project management skills. Fortunately, my work in educational technology also shifted towards more of the administrative type of work. Courses like grant writing, the evaluation course at EdTech 505, and even before EdTech 571 all have aspects of project management, which is really crucial for the type of work I do now for the University of Vermont. So in the next portion of the video, I'm going to talk about how my EdTech projects enhanced my career in both the teaching aspect and in the administrative aspect. And I'll be discussing those in the next portion. So I'm going to talk about how my EdTech courses, or some of my EdTech courses, impacted my teaching, most notably at UW-Stevens Point. The first project I'll discuss is my instructional design project, which I worked on in EdTech 503. For this class, sort of in the real-life scenario, I took over teaching a research class for Health Sciences 105, which was taught at UW-Stevens Point. One of my colleagues was going on maternity leave, and I took the class over for her. And I actually saw this as a great opportunity to rework an already good class that she had developed using the skills that I was learning at the time in EdTech 503. So this project included quite a bit of work. It has the typical goal statement and a rationale for the instructional design project. It also includes an analysis report with a needs assessment survey, needs assessment data, learning context description, the teaching context description, and a task analysis flowchart. There's also quite a bit of planning that went into the project. I had to create a list of my instructional objectives, as well as outline an instructional objectives matrix. I created an instructor guide so that if I had a colleague who wanted to take over the class or wanted to teach the class in my stead, I could simply give them the instructor guide and they could follow along pretty easily. I also created learning content and planned that learning content. And I finished up with a formative evaluation plan and report. And I also finished off with a standards grid. So altogether, the class, when I taught it, got a lot of praise from the faculty member who was primarily in charge of the class. And actually my colleague who, when she came off maternity leave, was one of the reviewers for my ID project, and she couldn't have been happier with the way I handled it. So I see that as a major success for both my work in EdTech and also my work in academic libraries and teaching library research instruction. So the next project that I want to highlight is the supplemental blog that I developed. I actually developed several of these throughout my time teaching at UW-Stevens Point. While the supplemental blog wasn't exactly an EdTech project, it was a project that was highly influenced by my experience in EdTech. And that's why I decided to include it here in my video as well as in my portfolio. So my first EdTech course, 571, that I took back in 2008, had me create a blog so that I could share my class reflections and post assignments for some of my classmates to review, as well as my professor. I ended up creating blogs for other courses, such as EdTech 541, which is integrating technology into the classroom curriculum, and EdTech 513, which is the multimedia class. And I created blogs for exactly the same reason, to share my reflections and to share my projects with others. And I really ended up liking the blog as a cheap and simple medium for disseminating media. It was easy to set up a blog, and users on the other end could access a link to a blog very easily. So during my time at UW-Stevens Point, I was library liaison to the College of Natural Resources. And every semester I had to teach 10 sections of an intensive 3-hour research lab. And this research lab was a major component of the students' grade, and these are students who were trying to enter into the College of Natural Resources, which was quite competitive. So it was my job to teach them how a number of library databases work, how to use sound research methods, and to help get them through the lab assignment. In order to help students out, because I noticed the first time I taught this without any of my EdTech training, students would often come to me in droves, trying to figure out how to answer the lab questions after I taught the lab. And I think this is because the lab was really long and intense, and the lab assignment was extraordinarily taxing as well. So I decided to come up with a supplemental blog to help students out. And the blog is pretty easy to follow. It has a number of links to screencasts that help students out with the problems that I identified as being the hardest to solve. And it gives students some nice tips there. And the results are actually great. I would teach the lab for the 3-hour session, and students would either complete or almost complete their lab assignment during the 3-hour block. But those who didn't, I found were asking fewer questions after the fact, because I noticed that there was a lot of activity in my blog. So while this blog, supplemental blog, was no major technological feat or design feat for that matter, it was potent in teaching learners how to effectively use library research databases. And I think it really did a great job of reducing cognitive load for the students who were in that lab. So for EdTech 512, I was actually able to come up with a web-based instructional design plan for a 1-credit library resources class that I taught traditionally, which was always taught in live session. Now, the preceding spring, before I took this course in the summer, I turned this from a very traditional library instruction type class into a technology integrated class, and that was with the help of EdTech 541. I took it the next step further with EdTech 512 when I had to come up with a plan for an instructional design plan for, again, taking that course and turning it into a fully online course, and then creating 5 Moodle modules for that online course. The WBID plan outlines all of the elements that you would see in a typical instructional design project plan: formative evaluation, summative evaluation, needs assessment, etc. And the Moodle site itself contains 5 modules that I actually was able to use in instruction at UW-Stevens Point. So when I came to the University of Vermont, as I discussed earlier, my job duties really made a dramatic shift from being more focused on teaching to being more focused on administrative tasks. And my new job required me to do things such as conduct evaluations, write grants, and manage staff. So the first project I'm going to discuss comes from EdTech 505. It's my evaluation report. And this is actually one of the most valuable skills I picked up in EdTech, even though it's not very techy. For this project, I had to run an evaluation of a multimedia computer lab that I run here at UVM. The computer lab is designed, it's an open lab for all UVM students and faculty and staff, and it's got a number of high-end Macintosh computers with all of the multimedia software you can imagine. So I ran an evaluation of the hardware and software, what user needs are. Also, I wanted to find out if our service model, our support model for that lab was effective. So I also rolled that factor into the evaluation. And when I completed my report, I submitted it not only to my professor for grading, but after my professor had finished with his feedback, I actually sent the cleaned up report to the Dean of Libraries and my boss, who is the Director of Systems and Access Services. Both of those folks were extraordinarily impressed with the work I did on this evaluation, and actually wrote me a letter telling me how happy they were with it. So the grant writing class I took, EdTech 551, was also incredibly useful for my administrative duties here at the University of Vermont. I wrote a grant proposal for my grad school project. to ask for a 3D printer, for funds for a 3D printer, 3D scanner, and filaments, as well as software that would accompany that hardware. And I was able to turn this project around and turn it into a real grant proposal that I ended up writing for. And it's actually a research grant opportunity that's given here through the University of Vermont. It's called the REACH grant. So I'll find out later this spring semester whether or not I receive funding for my 3D printer and scanner proposal. But I am excited about it, and when I read through the grant proposal, I also had that reviewed by the dean and by my supervisor, and both of them thought that it was a very, very strong proposal, and I'd have a pretty good shot of getting it. So we'll see how that all shakes out. So the final project I'm going to discuss is the technology proposal I wrote way back when I took EdTech 571 in 2008. This is probably one of the earliest examples, if not the earliest example I have of an EdTech project that I was able to use in an administrative capacity. And again, this is something that I used in a real-life, real-work situation. So the proposal I put together is in the form of a presentation, and it provides a rationale for the creation of a multimedia lab at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. This is sort of a dream I was chasing when I was there. And the proposal identifies and describes the planning team that I would put together, or that I did put together, project goals and objectives, a vision statement, a needs assessment, a staff development plan, an evaluation plan, and a timeline for the creation of the multimedia lab. So not only did I submit this body of work to my professor and my classmates in EdTech 571, but I also used the presentation proposal to give a presentation to the library faculty. Our library was run under faculty governance, the library director, and the provost. Well, to wrap things up, I've got to say that the practicality of the projects, it's really just sort of the nature of the projects that are given throughout the EdTech program, have been even more important to my career as an academic librarian than I really could have imagined. Because the projects were so practical and so flexible. The faculty were very flexible with the actual topic that I picked in my projects. I was not only able to produce projects that met the AECT standards, but I was also able to create projects that really furthered my career or enhanced my career as an academic librarian. So this program, I would say, is much more than the proverbial piece of paper. It really is about practical career development for educators in many disciplines and fields. And I would say I would recommend this program to anybody who's involved in the field of education as a real, true professional development milestone to accomplish. So for me, it's going to be difficult to imagine living without the EdTech program in my work life. I've been at it for quite a few years. I've had some stops and starts since I started in 2008. And the courses that I took really pushed me to come up with creative and practical projects that helped to push my career ahead. So after this experience, I don't think it'll be very long before I become restless again and take on more professional development challenges. I certainly won't miss the late nights and the long weekends working away on my project. But then again, having the discipline and being pushed to produce high-quality projects really, I think, has made me a better employee at the institutions that I work for. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.